Hello and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile, and this is a show where I get to talk about sports, I get to talk about business, and I get to talk about everything in between. Today, I have the incredible Matthew Hochberg. He's the founder of Hochberg Sports Marketing, but man, he's been around the block a little bit. I have SB Nation, Brooklyn Nets, Red Bulls, Momentum Sports and Entertainment, BSE, and Open Sponsorship, amongst others. I don't think I had enough room on my paper to fill it up, but Matthew, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure is all mine. Pleasure is all mine. I promise you that. So, uh, let's talk, man. You've had some fun stuff. You've done some cool things, all pretty much in the world of sports. As I said, there's some places on here that I didn't even get to write down. First question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and my answer has probably changed over the years. So I guess I'll give you the most current answer. And I think it really comes down to the change that sports could drive, and what we've been seeing today. I mean, I'm a massive NBA fan.
Mm-hmm.
I've also worked within the NBA, and just going back a couple weeks ago to the Milwaukee Bucks player strike, and really within 24, 48 hours of the players striking and threatening to leave the bubble and really cancel the rest of the season, we saw NBA owners and teams really in a matter of days, them announcing that they're turning their arenas into voting centers and making their arenas accessible to the masses, not even on election day, but prior to election day, to register to vote as well. And that is actionable change that was driven from sports, that is impacting the lives of millions of tens of millions of Americans, if not more. And I think that for better or for worse, these athletes and these teams and leagues are at the forefront of the national conversation, and they have a lot of power and a very large voice. And the fact that they're using it for good, for the good of the general public, for the good of the nation, is awesome. And so that is my most current answer. If you asked me a couple of years ago, it would have been different. If you asked me when I was, in high school, it would have been a lot different. But my most current answer is the large amounts of positive change that sports is driving.
I think it's a great answer too, because as you said, I mean, just that is one example. I mean, we know, I think it was the Milwaukee Bucks while they were in the locker room to talk about protesting the game. They also got on the phone with their state attorney general or some
Yep.
very, very higher up person in the state to say, hey, what the hell are we doing here? Come on, guys, like, let's get it together, which I think is awesome. I think it is fantastic that these players have the profile, they have the platform, they have the influence. I mean, we talk about influencer marketing all the time. I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit, but this is true, real influence. We're not trying to sell somebody something. We're not trying to make sure a brand is visible. We're literally trying to change the state, the people that live in it, for the people that live in it, and potentially, obviously, the country, because garnered a lot of attention. It's really never happened before, where teams, potentially protest or strike. I don't know exactly correct terminology of what they did, but it was incredible. I know that, which was pretty cool. And in terms of that, I mean, we've been seeing it a lot more recently with athletes, especially with social media. And I think the NBA is the biggest at it, right? I don't think something like this would have happened in basketball. Or I'm sorry, I don't think something like this would have happened in football, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, we saw them protest in baseball, but we also saw my Mets. We had our general manager get caught on that hot mic saying like, "Oh,
Yeah.
but they're thinking about coming out and playing in an hour." It's like, that's not the point. That's not how this works. So they all did their protest, but then there's just double headers the next day. So while it was cool, it was a nice gesture, and I think they stood in solidarity with their brothers and sisters across the NBA, the WNBA, and all these other sports. Something like this in the NFL wouldn't have happened. Something like this isn't as impactful in MLB. Why do you think it is so impactful in the NBA?
Yeah. I think it's a really good point and a good question. I think it is as impactful across sports, but what I do think is different is that these other sports and these other leagues are more hesitant to take these more drastic measures, and the NBA is really acting as the leader. We even saw back in March, I believe it
Yep.
was on March 11th. I'll never forget where I was when I got the notification from Woj, I think on my phone,
Mm-hmm.
that Adam Silver had decided to cancel or postpone the NBA season. And within 24 hours, all the other leagues were coming out and and they were making statements in regards to their seasons, and there were more postponements and more cancellations. So I really give a lot of credit to the NBA leadership of Adam Silver, and as well as the players. And they're the ones who are truly not scared to voice their opinions and to take drastic measures to be able to drive that change. And they're almost giving the athletes in other sports and these other leagues the permission, so in a sense, to go out and do something similar. It's also different. I mean, the NBA is predominantly a Black sport, whereas the NHL is, I don't know, like 75% white or something like that. And obviously, with what's going on in the country, it just makes sense that that they would speak up and kind of drive that change. It's unfortunate. It has to be that way, but that's how it seems to have gone this far.
Yeah, and hey, it happened. I think that's the most important part.
Right.
Yeah, we saw the MLB. They're always they always do the wrong thing. I think it's hysterical. They're just always consistently wrong. So that's great. But yeah, interesting way to start up this conversation. And I know, as you said, you worked in the NBA. You're a massive NBA fan. You worked for the Nets. You also worked for BSE, Brooklyn
Sports and Entertainment.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah, you got it.
I got that.
It's parent company of the Brooklyn Nets.
So,
and now it's BSE Global, but it
Yeah.
was Brooklyn Sports Entertainment when I was there. Yep.
And so I guess, was that one of were you a Nets fan growing up? Was this kind of like a little bit of a dream job at some point?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up as a New Jersey Nets fan, even though, what's that?
New Jersey Nets fan. Hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though most of my friends around me, even though they're in Jersey, they were fans of the New York Knicks. So I felt I was on a bit of an island. But I grew up a Nets fan. Again, big NBA fan, and working for them was it really was a dream come true. It was unbelievable. I actually found a text from a relative when I was interning there, and it was me texting him a photo of the court, and he replied, one day you will be on that court full time, or something like that. And then I actually found that text when I was working there and showing fans the court. So it was definitely a neat experience, and I really enjoyed my time working there for sure.
That is awesome. And so you had 2 different stints with them, correct?
Yeah. So I interned there when I was in school, going into my junior year, and then I was fortunate enough to get a full-time role in my second full-time gig, coming out of college.
Hell yeah. And yeah, you did have a few different ones. I mean, I rattled off a few. You worked with the Red Bulls, you worked with Momentum, BSE Global, Open Sponsorship, and you did all this in a relatively short period of time, which, it's sports, man. I know people that pretty much change their job every 8 months until they get to the level or get to where they want to get to. And some people are willing to do that. Other people, now I've had the opportunity to talk to people where they've been with one franchise for 25 years and just happen to be able to work up that food chain. I guess, what was it for you? And how comfortable were you being able to, I mean, I'm not going to say move all over the world or anything, but I mean, New Jersey, New York, Washington, D.C. I mean, you moved a little bit around. What was it like? And I guess, what was the reasoning behind all of that?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'll take a step back and talk about that internship experience that I had with the Brooklyn Nets when I was in school going into my junior year. That was really my first experience working within the sports industry. Prior to that, I would guess now just consider myself a sports fan. And that really opened up my eyes to all of the different, possibilities to actually work in the industry. I was working on the sponsorship and partnership side of the industry for the Brooklyn Nets at the time. And I remember going to a New York Yankees game that summer, just as a fan. And it was the first time where I was not just looking at what was actually happening on the field, but I was looking at all the signage around the stadium. And I remember I took out my Brooklyn Nets notepad that I had, and I wrote down all of the sponsors that were Yankees partners that were not partners of the Brooklyn Nets. And at that time, I had all of them memorized in my head. And I remember a friend turning to me being like, "Dude, like, what are you doing right now?" And it was a very different experience. So I knew from that point on, I wanted to work on the sponsorship side of the industry. But I also studied sport management and media in school, and I understood that it was a little difficult to kind of get that type of a role right out of school.
Hmm.
And a more traditional path was going through the ticket sales route, and that's what I did. So started out at Monumental Sports Entertainment, the parent company of the Washington Wizards and Capitals and Washington Mystics, um, doing ticket sales there. But always kind of had my head down and knew I wanted to get to the sponsorship side of the industry, and was there for 6-7 months and really enjoyed my time there. Then I was at the Brooklyn Nets in an account executive group sales role, selling group tickets for the Nets, Islanders, concerts, events, etc. at Barclays Center. And then from there, I was fortunate enough to get my first sponsorship role. So I really didn't mind moving around. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. I had never lived in Washington, D.C. before, and got to experience a new area and meet new people that I wouldn't have met. And I'm actually really close with those people from Monumental. We're still in a group chat and we're talking all the time. And so really fortunate to have that experience. And, I was just kind of on a path to get to the sponsorship side of the industry.
Yeah, and so what is it? I mean, I think that is because you had such a clear path and you had a focus on where you were trying to get to and understood have to start in ticket sales. Okay, then you get to move up to bigger ticket sales, right? And then from there, you have the capabilities to then go and do what you want to do. What is it about the sponsorship partnership side of the industry that really interests you that much? Was it just the fact that you were at that Yankees game? Like what was it about that moment where you were like, okay, this is kind of cool, and this is something I can see myself diving into for a relatively long period of time?
For sure. Yeah, that's a good question.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Sports is entertainment, or it's supposed to be entertainment, uh, at least partly. And so much of what happens behind the scenes in regards to the entertainment is made possible because of the partners and because of the sponsors who are coming in and activating and creating these awesome fan experiences. And I just thought that was super neat. And, that these sponsors are shelling out, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 figures, depending on the opportunity, for these partnerships. And it just seemed super fascinating to be able to kind of facilitate those relationships. And not only that, but it was just uh, I just lost my train of thought, so I'm just gonna leave it there.
Okay, I like that. I lost your train of thought a little bit too, so I guess I'm kidding. No, and I think, I've always been interested in the sponsorship and the partnership opportunities as well, because I think it depends on how you're doing it, right? And we're gonna get to what you're currently doing with your sports
Sure.
marketing, where you're working with athletes and some properties as well. But I've always found, when you work with properties, there's I don't know, there's just so much more you can do. I've worked with a couple properties in the past recently, and there's just more activation around it. There's more you can get a little bit more specific when working with athletes themselves. It's you kind of have this story, and you really can't change that story because then it's inauthentic. It's not genuine, and the advertising isn't going to come off as well. So, with that being said, let's talk about what you're doing now. I mean, well, first off, when did you decide that you wanted to own your own business and start your own business? Considering again, you're only out of school like what 4, 5, 6 years at this point. It's really not that long into your career.
Yep. Yeah, it's like 5 years at this point. So I started thinking about it when I was in my first sponsorship gig, which was at a company called the Relevant Sports Group. Relevant Sports Group is owned by Stephen Ross, who owns the Miami Dolphins, and he founded an agency that then launched the International Champions Cup, which is a global soccer tournament that brings the best clubs over from Europe to the States each summer for a slate of matches. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to happen this past summer due to obvious reasons. But that's when I first started thinking about it. And I give a lot of credit to my boss and someone who I consider a mentor. His name is Jeff Lesser. And he really gave me a lot of the tools to manage the sponsorship process myself. And that's when I started thinking, like I'm doing a lot of this process myself. Of course, Jeff is helping me and training me, but a lot of it was me doing it and having these calls and putting together the proposals and negotiating and retooling the proposals and brainstorming the creative ideas for the partnerships. So I started thinking about it then, and then I had another stop after Relevant at a startup called Open Sponsorship,
Mhm.
which really was an entirely different experience in terms of experiencing the startup world. I was employee number 10. I was the first ever
Wow.
account manager. So it was a very different experience, but one where I learned a lot and I really appreciated the experience. And then, I just figured while I'm young and have the opportunity to do so, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to be in a position to do it, I just decided to launch my own company.
That is awesome. Yeah, Open
Yeah.
Sponsorship, I'm very familiar with them. Some good people. Name of the founder, Ishveen? I don't want to say her
Yep.
name wrong. Ishveen, yeah, I've seen her speak on a
Yeah, that's
couple
her name.
panels. She
Cool.
is pretty fantastic, and she does some pretty cool work. And it's, I mean, it's the combination. It's that nice little intersection of technology and sponsorships where, it's kind of, I'm not, I personally don't love it as much. I see obviously the need and the solution and then the hole it fills. But obviously there's a lot of different ways to do this. And I think that is one way. And clearly they're killing it. So shout out to Open Sponsorship and what they're
Yep.
doing. Couple different competitors to Open Sponsorship as well. But I mean, let's stop there for a second. What's it like? Again, understanding that you want to go and start your own business at some point and then showing up to a very, just small. Employee number 10, you're in a small tech-ish startup in the sports sponsorship space. I'm sure there was an opportunity. Oh, that was a lot of S's. I'm sure there's an opportunity for you to hang out there for a while and, grow with this company, considering I'm sure you were employee number 10. I'm sure other people in front of you have already left or will start leaving soon. Was there ever any opportunity or consideration to really hang out there for a while? Or was this, hey, let me just stay here for a little bit, really just figure out this space some more in a different way than, where you were with relevancy and, kind of understand this side of it to then just be able to take that information and go elsewhere? Or was, again, there an opportunity to stay there and maybe grow the company a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. I think there could have been. I certainly went into, um, I would say all of my jobs aside from my first job at
Mhm.
Monumental, when that was an inside sales role. And, I heard about inside sales. Hey, your job is in inside sales is to get out of inside sales.
Yep.
So aside from that, at the Brooklyn Nets, at Relevant, and at Open Sponsorship, I went into those jobs thinking I was going to be there long term and wanting to be
Mhm.
there long term and wanting to make a home for myself. Because as much as I'm okay with kind of switching around, I also appreciate the opportunity to grow with employees and to grow with an employer and to grow with just to grow as a person overall, in one organization. It just seemed, at every stop there was something that kind of allowed me to get to the next step in my career. And this is my career I'm talking about, and I'm going to do what's best for me. And that's something that, when I talk to college students or aspiring sports business professionals, it's something I always tell them, that they have to look out for their careers first. And if you have another opportunity, I hear people say, oh, I feel bad if I leave this boss or leave this company, they've been so great. And that's amazing, and that's great, you've had that experience, but at the end of the day, you have to look out for yourself first.
100%.
So I really enjoyed my time at Open Sponsorship and learned a lot and met great people and great connections. But I just felt at the time it was in my best interest to launch Hochberg Sports Marketing and give it a go on my own.
And let's talk about it, man. So Hochberg Sports Marketing, you gave it a go on your own. You're still doing it. You're still rocking and rolling. I know it's kind of changed a little bit over time, especially what's happened over the last 6 months. So talk to me about those first few months and, how did you land that first client? What was it? Did you have that client kind of in the bag before you potentially moved on from your previous job? Like how did that process, walk me through that timeline a little bit?
For sure, yeah. So I launched Hochberg Sports Marketing just pretty much right before COVID hit, so at least
Mhm.
here in the states. So definitely an interesting time
Yeah,
to
perfect
launch
timing,
to
actually,
launch a
I'd
new
say.
agency. Yeah, right. But my first client was AVP Beach Volleyball. AVP Beach Volleyball was actually a property that we were working with when I was at Relevant, and had a great relationship with them there. They're great people, have an awesome property. It's a mission driven organization, and I stayed in touch with them and had kept a good relationship with them. So when I decided to launch Hochberg Sports Marketing, I had a conversation with their head of partnerships and was able to get them on board as client number one. So um, I was focusing on finding AVP Beach Volleyball partners for their 2020 summer tour. Essentially, how AVP works is it's not a traditional sports league that they have teams in certain
Mhm.
cities and then teams are traveling to those cities, but they have they have individual players and they have 9 tour stops around the country where these AVP beach volleyball athletes they're competing in tours. So they're bringing this large event to beaches all around the country in LA, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, New York City, Chicago, Seattle, even Hawaii. So it's going all over. So my focus was finding partners for them. And it's a great property because it's so focused on health and wellness. And it's such a that for anyone who works in health and wellness or who even works sports sponsorship, I'm sure you've had a lot of conversations with health and wellness brands, and it's a very opportune time to work with those brands, given the trends of the American consumer. So I was speaking with a lot of brands, and I'd actually closed my first 2 deals as a founder of this company on behalf of AVP Beach Volleyball, and neither contract went through because of COVID. So that was a bummer because it was something I was working on for a couple of months at that point and had pretty much dedicated 99% of my time to. So that was definitely a bummer. And from that point, when it occurred to me and I guess the rest of the country that COVID was a big deal and it was
Yeah.
not going away anytime soon, I thought to myself and I made a pretty quick decision that I was already too deep in this, and I'd already laid a foundation, and I wasn't going to hang it up. So at that point, I pivoted to athletes, and athletes. So athlete marketing is something that I had experience in already,
Mhm.
and was passionate about, and saw a great opportunity in. So I just decided to kind of jump in from there.
That is awesome, man. Yeah, it's obviously unfortunate that everything did go down, but as you said, you were able to pivot pretty quickly. And I'm sure you still have those relationships with those brands. Crossing my fingers, they haven't gone out of business yet. That would be pretty crazy. But you still have the relationship with AVP. So I'm sure when everything starts up again, which I'm just kind of assuming it does at this point, I don't know when, just kind of
Hmm.
hoping actually that everything does. And yeah, hand up, I might have been one of those people that was like, this isn't that big a deal. We'll be fine. A month. I can hang out inside for a month, not a big deal. And now we're
Yeah,
on month 6, I think,
crazy.
of what's going on. So hopefully everything does figure itself out sooner rather than later. Because yeah, I just want to go out to dinner again. I don't know. New Jersey, we barely just opened up restaurants. I kind of just
Yeah,
want
man.
to go out to dinner again, but that would be nice. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
hear you.
and with that, I guess what was that like demoralizing? As you said, you set that foundation, you had everything ready, you had 2 contracts in hand, a couple months in, and then bang, like something completely out of your control, right? Like obviously control what you can control, but that's totally out of your control. That must have just sucked, especially right off the bat. I mean, was there any thought to maybe give some of your old bosses a call and say, "Hey, you guys looking for any extra help? Anything I can do?" Or was it that easy of a pivot to say no? Like now I think, this is another area we can build out so that way in the future now you have properties and you have athletes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I would be lying if I said I didn't. If
Mhm.
go to Indeed.com once or twice
Yep.
during that period when I was feeling down on myself, but I still did make the decision pretty quickly that I was going to pivot to athletes. It was something that I'd actually already started to do a bit even pre-COVID, just because a lot of the brand conversations
Mhm.
that I was having they may not have been the best fit for AVP, but there may have been conversations,
Yep.
that would make sense for athletes. So I was thinking to myself, I'm just having all these conversations, and some of them are going to waste. So why not kind of bring some athletes in and be able to get the most value out of these conversations and to be able to actually help these brands, as opposed to in some situations trying to sell them something that they may not be interested in, and it's kind of a lose lose for all sides. So I had already made that decision a bit to bring in athletes, and it was a pretty quick decision. Kind of just was a natural segue, I guess. So I guess since COVID, pretty much totally switched from focusing primarily on AVP and a few other properties to focusing primarily on the athletes.
And so I know you have an interesting, I'm not going to say spin, but an interesting way of looking at the particular athletes that you work with. Now, I'm sure you'd love to work with Patrick Mahomes and get him that next Oakley deal, right? That's, I think, a no brainer. But I know you in particular have a great way of looking at it. So please share that with us. because you and I actually share the same sentiment when it comes to a lot of these athletes.
For sure. And shout out to Jacqueline Dahl. I think that's her name. She is the marketing manager for
Oh,
Patrick Mahomes,
oh yeah,
and
shout out.
he is awesome. He So in addition to his deals, he just puts out super original content
Hmm.
on his social feeds, which is really interesting, and I think is kind of like the future of how athletes market themselves, is putting out their own original content as opposed to just retweeting like an ESPN highlight or something. But I guess that's for another conversation. So yes, so my take on athletes is, I truly believe in athletes and think they are awesome people. And in my view, they are the best form of influencer, because they sure are influencers because they're influencing people,
Hmm.
but they're not influencers by trade. They're influencers by nature. And no disrespect to the standard health and wellness influencer, because I think that they still put out awesome content and have a tough job, and they're doing great work. But I just feel athletes have a connection to their followers that most influencers don't have and can't have, because they aren't professional athletes. I mean, these professional athletes are, have been training and competing their entire lives to get to the level where they're at now. So uh, they have a trust with their followers that most people don't have. And what I've found from a bunch of years of working in the industry is that a lot of brands had a bad taste in their mouth of sports marketing, because they think, and they've pretty much have only been pitched on high five, six, or seven figure deals.
Yep.
And that's not the reality of what you can actually do sports marketing for. There are athletes, for example, we're working with athletes in the National Women's Soccer League, which is the top flight of women's soccer in the U.S. It's a growing league, but the max salary is $50,000, and that is not including the U.S. Women's National Team players
Hmm.
who are paid by the U.S. Soccer Federation. So it's different. I'm just talking about
Hmm.
athletes players who are not on the U.S. Women's National Team. Max salary is $50K. So these partnerships to them, they are super impactful to their daily lives and can go a long way. And they're super into them and want to partner with brands that they're passionate about in sectors that they're passionate about. And these brands don't even know that they even exist. Like, these brands, these growing brands, I'm not talking about the Coca-Colas and Nikes of the world. I'm talking about your startup plant-based protein that may have a budget of 10K, but can't afford an NFL or NBA star, and they go, okay, well, we're just gonna work with influencers then. But it in my view, and this is what I preach, it just makes so much more sense to work with athletes who are training every day, who can tell an authentic story about how that plant-based protein is fueling their training and competition. So it's really Hochberg Sports Marketing at this point, in regards to the athlete partnerships. I see ourselves as that bridge between the growing brand and the niche athlete. And something else interesting that we found is these niche athletes, I won't say on all occasions, but on many occasions, their social media engagement is actually significantly higher
Hmm.
than that of star players. I always bring up the example of LeBron James. I mean, I love LeBron. I'm a massive
Me too.
LeBron James fan. I was actually talking to my girlfriend the other day about LeBron, just because I go on LeBron rant sometimes. And he's been in the NBA since I've been 9 years old, which is
Hmm.
just crazy to think about. But anyway, he has 72 million followers on Instagram. Obviously, none of these athletes in niche sports like National Women's Soccer League or AVP Beach Volleyball are competing with 72 million followers. But LeBron's Instagram engagement is like 1%. Obviously, that still means that there are a lot of people engaging with this content. But some of these volleyball players we're working with, their Instagram engagement is 18%, is 20%. So it just shows, if you're following this volleyball player, you are passionate about what that volleyball player is doing on a daily basis, what they're putting in their what they're putting in their bodies, how they're training, what products they're using. So it just, I think, makes a lot of sense for these growing brands to test out the waters of sports marketing before they can afford, a tier A type of athlete.
I completely agree. I think going with some of these smaller athletes, as you said, I mean, that's the argument I make as well. Is the engagement is significantly higher if you're following LeBron big deal. So it's 71,999,999 other people, right? It's really not that impressive. I mean, he'll just come up and it's like, yeah, sure, I'll follow LeBron, whatever. But if you're going to follow one of these niche athletes, these niche sport athletes, someone like in the National Women's Soccer League, I mean, I think that is a very specific, you sought that person out. You are looking to see what that person is doing. I actually had Rachel Breton on. She was a part of the Morristown team, the Sky, I want to say, right? Maybe
Yeah, a Sky Blue FC.
Sky Blue FC. Thank you. She's incredible. I think she's kind of on hiatus right now with the team, but she's an amazing follow on Instagram. So everybody out there, make sure to go follow Rachel Breton. Every Wednesday, she posts this video of herself dancing, and she's an incredible dancer. And they're all hysterical. My favorite one, she did one to My Pony by Genuine, which was absolutely fantastic. But it's just stuff like that. Like, you are seeking out that athlete. You are specifically saying, like, I am looking for you. I'm going to find you and I'm going to follow you and see what you're doing and engage with that content. And I think that's the most important part because, yeah, LeBron might have more eyeballs, but let's be honest, we already know about half the internet's fake anyway. Most of them are bots or fake accounts or triple accounts or, burner accounts. So how many of them are actual real people of those 72 million that are actually following LeBron? I can't answer that. I'm sure Instagram could, but they don't want to tell us because that would ruin influencer marketing. But the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 people that are following someone like Rachel Breton or some of these athletes that you work with, those are very deliberate. Those are very specific follows, and they're probably people that look up to these athletes. These are people that actually care about their stories. And as you said, it's very authentic to utilize this plant-based protein company and an athlete that has something, and you can tell that story authentically. I think that's the most important part. And so when you started to pivoting to athletes, was the niche athlete always the specific one? Did you shoot for a couple NBA or NFL guys and be like, wait a second, like maybe there's a better way to do this? Or did you have that specific plan right from the start? As with AVP beach volleyball, granted it's a big property, but in the grand scheme of things, it's more
Sure.
so on the smaller side.
Yeah, for sure. And just to add one point to that, Michael, it's also not only are these niche athletes scoring higher engagement rates, but it's also just overall, I guess it relates to engagement, but it's a more intimate type of
Yep.
relationship and more intimate type of partnership. If you're partnering with LeBron, sure, you're going to get a shit ton of eyeballs to see that product that LeBron's holding, but it just won't come off the same because it's LeBron James.
Yeah.
That's the best way to put it. So it's just a much more intimate relationship, and that's what I love the most about it.
I will say one last point about LeBron. I love that cranberry Sprite commercial he does. He did it once, and it runs for, like, every Christmas for, like,
Yeah,
the last 10 years. So shout out for him making some money there. But yeah, keep
yeah,
going.
yeah, 100%. No, he's a smart businessman for sure. But yes. So to answer your question, I never really considered seeking athletes or properties out in the mainstream world, and that's for a couple of reasons. Number one is it's much tougher, to be perfectly honest, and most of them go to a select few agencies, and that's that, and it's tough to compete with them. So I wasn't going to try to at this point. But not only that, on a personal level, it's much more fulfilling to do these deals for athletes who are actually seeking out brands for authentic partnerships, and to be honest, need the money more than an NBA star. At a previous role, I was a part of and was kind of the lead person on a partnership with a tier A athlete that closed for 6 figures. And I was super excited about it and thought it was like the coolest thing in the world at the time. It was my biggest deal at that point. And then I realized when it came down to it that athlete was not even aware of anything until like a second before he signed his name on the contract. And that was that. And he's doing some social media posts and he's getting paid 6 figures, and that's that. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, and I'm not saying that there's no deal with tier A athletes that are authentic or impactful, because that's not the case, and there are many examples of the exact opposite. But these niche athletes can really use it, honestly. I'm working with one athlete in particular. Her name is Dani Colaprico. She's plays for the Chicago Red Stars of the National Women's Soccer League. She's awesome. Shout out Danny
Shout
if
out Danny.
you're watching this, Danny.
Do you have Danny's handle so we can all go follow her?
Yeah, I think it just Danny Colaprico. So DANNY COLAPRICO.
Love it.
Yeah. So, and Danny, she was the NWSL Rookie of the Year in 2015. She, there you go. She played on the U.S. Women's National Team for a hot second.
Hotter second than I was there.
Yeah, she's played overseas. She's won 2 championships overseas. She's been in the NWSL final 6 years in a row with the Chicago Red Stars. She has 35K followers on Instagram, and she maybe once in her entire career, and she's been within the NWSL for I think 6 years at this point. She had one brand reach out to her one time about one deal. Never had any representation ever reach out to her, and I just think that's crazy. Like, she is a formidable, talented, and awesome athlete, also a great person, more importantly, and no one's really ever paid her any mind. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is find these awesome athletes that have been overlooked and underserved and give them the attention that Wasserman and CAA and Octagon are giving to their tier A athletes who are making them millions of dollars. It makes sense to a degree as to why agencies in the past have not focused on them, because that's not where the money is. So I'm trying to build out a model where you can build a sustainable business and still serve the underserved and help these athletes who can really use it, who can really use the attention, and just haven't been getting it.
And so, like, especially with the rise of like micro influencers, right? Over the last couple of years, I'm sure you know who Gary Vee is, and everyone out there listening. Like, that's always something that he's talked about with his companies, is making sure that the micro influencers are real. Like, someone with 5, 6, 7,000 followers, 35,000 followers, that's a little bit bigger, of course, but like, why have brands never paid attention to these athletes before? And again, maybe not the Bud Lights and the, Anheuser-Busch's of the world, the Coca-Colas, the Pepsis of the world. But as you were saying before, there's a lot of these smaller brands. Why have nobody thought like, hey, maybe we can get some of these still important athletes with smaller followings, or even aggregate them together, maybe get 5, 6, 7 of them. That way each of them gets some money, and now you kind of have this team to follow. Why do you think this was never, I don't know, never a priority for some of these smaller brands, especially? I mean, even some of the big brands, they could do something like this, but especially these smaller brands.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. I think it comes down to a few things. Number one, it's simply hard to find them. First off, if I'm a new CBD brand and I'm looking to work with athletes to show how my CBD is helping with soreness or whatever it is, how am I going to find these athletes? If I'm not a sports marketing expert, I'm a founder of the CBD company. How do I even know the National Women's Soccer League exists? Like, how am I going to find these athletes? So I think number one, it just comes down to actual knowledge of sports marketing, and that's another service that not to promote Hochberg Sports Marketing too much, but
you're literally here to promote your business, dude.
There we go. I was actually thinking about putting the handle of Hochberg Sports Marketing instead of my name, but I didn't do that. I thought that'd be a little too absurd.
All your handles are in the show notes. Don't worry,
Perfect.
everybody. I'll get you.
Perfect. There we go. But yeah, so it comes down to knowledge of actually being able to find these athletes. This is another service that we're providing to brands, where we're actually partnering with brands to build out their sports marketing strategies, to not just close a one-off deal between one brand and one athlete, which that may go well, but honestly, a one-off deal where a brand may be expecting sales and the athlete just going to do a post which isn't going to drive sales, to be perfectly honest, those deals don't really seem to go the best. So we're really trying to come to join with brands as their sports marketing partner to build out that strategy. So it comes down to knowledge, number one, and also in some cases, what I found, it comes down to cost, because these are professional athletes. Even if they aren't NBA or NFL stars, they still are professional athletes, and they have a worth for themselves, and I have a worth for them. And I encourage, some of these athletes I'm working with who may have done deals for product only in the past where, a brand will just send them product and they'll post in exchange for the product being sent to them. I do not encourage that for the athletes I'm working with. I think they are worth actual cash, and they've trained and they are at a certain level in their careers where they should not do product only deals. I've seen some athletes that I was shocked by who were doing product only deals. So the issue is that some influencers for, say, a similar follower rate
Mhm.
or similar engagement rate, they are doing product only deals. So it's also about educating the brands to be like, that's great, you're doing that with your health and wellness influencers, but these athletes are not health and wellness influencers. They can serve as your brand ambassadors to promote your health and wellness products, but they are athletes, and these are professional athletes who have been training since they've been babies, and they deserve uh, actual compensation for giving up space on their feeds and taking their time to promote your content. So it's also just educating these brands on who athletes actually are and why they deserve payment. And honestly, once you explain that, like, most brands do understand that, but they've never been told that before,
Mhm.
and they've never thought of it. So it's really just comes down to education as well.
And I love the passion that I hear through that. Like, you're very I do appreciate that for everybody listening, for everybody watching, you can see it in your face too, but for everyone listening, I mean, it's very clear how much this does mean to you, and I think that that part is very important, especially working with some of these smaller athletes. Like, let's be honest, as you said, that there's a reason why these bigger agencies don't work with a lot of these athletes is because it's not nearly as lucrative. But as you said, you're here to figure out a way to do that. And I think that part's very important. It seems like you are well on your way. And in terms of working with these athletes, and you brought it up before, and I wrote a little note down because I did think it would be something good to, maybe finish out this conversation with for the next few minutes on athletes creating content. I think that is important, as you said, taking up space on their feed, like that is very important. You don't want to overload your followers. You don't want to, there's no reason to post just random stuff for random reasons. If that's your thing, that's your thing. But many of these athletes, it's very specific, as you brought up with Patrick Mahomes. He's creating his own content now. Patrick Mahomes signed a $500 million contract and has a team probably that follows him everywhere. For some of these smaller athletes, how do you suggest to them to be able to go and create authentic content that really speaks to who they are to their followers in a way that, again, isn't taking up their entire day, but understanding that, hey, your number one overall job is to be an athlete and be as awesome as you can on the field, because that will influence a lot of people that way too. But you have to understand social media now needs to kind of be your second job. How do you suggest to the athletes that you're working with to go out and create this type of content that will then, again, it's not going to be tomorrow, but potentially down the road, you as their agent, you as their representative, you as the partner to their business can then go to these brands and say, hey, look, we create this original content. This is what we've been doing for months and months and months. This is what we've seen from it. How do you have those conversations with your athletes?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really good question, and it's honestly tough. I honestly don't think much of it should be placed on the athletes, because, to your point, as you just said, their job is to perform on the field. And to be honest, if they're performing on the field, that will outweigh any
Mhm.
sort of social media post in terms of influencing a wide, a wide audience. So they have to focus on the field and on their court and their competition. I think most of that actually comes down to the agency. So, for example, with Danny Colaprico, we're currently in the process of building out a brand for her, and building out a website that will have a newsletter that she will write. We are going to sell merchandise. We're creating her a logo. And that is something that's very common in the mainstream sports world. I just saw Julian Edelman. He just
Yep.
launched a new line of merchandise,
Yeah, it looks
which is very
terrible too.
cool.
It
What's
looks
that?
bad, though. It looks really
Yeah,
bad. Yeah,
yeah, it's okay. It's
he
okay.
clearly was like, "TB12, I wanna do something like that," and it's just like, "Alright,
Yeah.
JE11, great job, man." It looks like crap, but that's just my opinion, I guess.
Right, right. But so it's very common in the mainstream sports world for these high tier athletes to have their own websites and sell their own merch and do all of that. But it's extremely rare, actually, when it comes to these more niche, growing type of sports, whether it's AVP, National Women's Soccer League, ski, surf, etc. So it's a model that we're trying to bring in. I really think the onus falls on the agency or the representative to be able to do that. That being said, there has to be buy-in from the athlete. If an athlete is not excited to do it, or doesn't want to do it, it's silly for someone like me to continue to
Yeah.
go ahead and do that, because then it just doomed to fail. So someone like Danny, I was fortunate enough to find someone like Danny who's so open to this and who wants to grow and build her brand and who believes in this and who is working with a youth soccer clinic to teach soccer to children. And we're currently building a youth soccer clinic for her next month in Chicago and finding partners for that. So it's really with someone like Danny, we are taking a 360-degree type of approach where these brands not only, sure, we offer Instagram on her feed, but now
Mhm.
we offer inclusion in newsletter. We offer signage around the field where her youth soccer clinic is going to be, logo placement on the youth soccer clinic jersey that the kids are going to be wearing. So creating this brand for these athletes is also then allowing them to find more impactful brand partners that truthfully are going to pay them more. And it's just kind of a win-win all around.
Yeah, and the brand partner is gonna be more invested too, right? Like, if it's just a
Right.
single social media post, it's really easy in a couple weeks to be like, "That was cool." But
Right.
now, especially if it's going to be this long-term thing where you're gonna be in a newsletter every week or every month, whatever it is, that there's multiple clinics coming up that you're gonna be a part of. The brand's gonna be more invested, dollars and cents wise, but also just from a marketing perspective, they're gonna wanna make sure, partly because it's more dollars and cents, but they're going to really want to make sure these things go off without a hitch. And I think another good point is, perception's reality, right? Like we may be having this conversation about Danny again. Shout out Danny. We'll all follow her after this conversation. But we're having this conversation. We think of Tom Brady and his TB12. We think of, I'm sure Patrick Mahomes might have a logo. I honestly have no idea. If he doesn't, I'm sure he's getting one soon. Um, but it's just one of those things where if you have that perception as an athlete of, I have my own logo, I have my own website, I have you have all these things, people are going to see that. Now, whether a million people look at it or 35,000 people look at it or five people look at it, the perception is very big. The perception makes you look much bigger, which again is just going to capture more attention overall because of this. So I think that's a really great point on your part to be able to build something like this out for Danny and some of the other athletes that you're working with, because again, that's just going to lead to more lucrative opportunities for her, which is the number one thing, but then also allow you to make a couple dollars, because the more dollars you make, the more athletes you can help, the more money, more athletes you can help, the more money you make, which means you can help
Exactly.
even more athletes. And that's essentially
Yep.
the whole goal of the business.
That's the whole goal right there.
I love it, man. Good stuff. This was great, man. This was
Yeah.
great. You have some fun?
No. Yeah, no, this was great.
Love it.
Appreciate having me on. I've been seeing all your LinkedIn posts, being like, man, when is Michael talking to me? So
Hey,
it was great to do this.
episode 202, baby. Episode
Wow, 202.
202. You're
Okay.
killing it.
Okay, there we go. I
You're
love it.
killing it. Appreciate the hell out of you, man. Matthew Hochberg, founder of Hochberg Sports Marketing. Where can everybody find you on the internet?
You can find me at Hochberg on Twitter. That's the social media outlet I promote the most, just because I'm a big believer in Twitter. But
Good for
also
you,
at
man. I
Hochberg. What's
hate
that?
Twitter. I hate Twitter. It's the worst
Oh,
place on
dude.
planet Earth. Oh my god.
As someone who's involved with sports and obviously clearly also interested and talented in the media space, and I've seen you work for a few other different websites and do some sports betting stuff as well. I did a little stalking.
Thanks.
You gotta be more active on Twitter.
I
I'm
know,
telling
but
you,
it's just
it's where the conversation is.
it's just an awful play. I believe you. We'll talk about that afterwards. We'll talk about
Cool,
we'll find you
cool.
on Twitter. Where else can we find you?
Yeah, Twitter at Hochberg and Hochberg Sports Marketing. You can just follow at Hochberg SM on all channels, social media channels, and HochbergSportsMarketing.com.
Love it. I will have all those links. Don't worry, everybody.
Cool,
I'll
man.
also grab Danny's link. Make sure to send me that one too, so we all can
Appreciate
go
it.
follow her there. But for Matthew, for myself, hope everybody makes it just an absolutely wonderful day here in New Jersey. The two of us. Love it. Thanks for your time today, man.
Bye, guys.